The road to the Derby and the money back special at Xpressbet and Xpressbet. Head to Tampa, where it's Tampa Bay Derby time. Pretty good field this year. Chad Brown holds a strong hand. Is he going to win this year's Tampa Bay Derby, or will it be someone else? We'll talk about it and more on Horse Sense. Bailey Armour and I. It's up next.
Welcome back to another episode of Horse Sense. As always, I'm Bailey Armour, joined alongside the world-class Scott Shapiro as we dive into horse races from Tampa Bay Downs this week. Coming up on Saturday, the next stop on the road to the Triple Crown is the Tampa Bay Derby. Race caller Jason Beam, I'm sure, will do a phenomenal job with this race. We've got a field of 7 to cover as we get into the races. But before we do, as always, I'm going to give you a little rundown of our Xpressbet and Xpressbet promotions this week, as usual, designed by yours truly. Make sure you check out the promos tab on the Xpressbet website or in the Xpressbet app to see a full list. But the star of the show this month in March is a $2 million late pick for a hit and split at Gulfstream every Thursday in March and every Sunday at Santa Anita. So make sure you load up your Xpressbet account and check out all of the content that we've got. I know that Scott's got some promo action surrounding that in his blogs. So don't forget to check those out as we get into March.
Indeed, and looking forward to, I'll have a Sunday one up. Most people are watching this after Thursday, but JP had the Gulfstream Thursday for us, right? Thursday? You said Thursday at Gulfstream, and then
Gulfstream
Sunday that is me. We'll segue into the tournament talk where it's beat the host. The regular season is over. Week 8 done. 496 players managed to beat the host over the period of time. Best of luck to all those competing for the championships this week and all those that earned prizes along the way. There were some pretty good efforts, pretty strong performances, including a few folks that were able to beat the host each of the 8 weeks. Fun tournament. Best of luck this weekend. Well, Bailey, last week really lived up to expectations, both down in Florida and out west. We'll start down in Florida, where it looked like my pick, River Thames, was home free in the Fountain of Youth, but not so fast. It was Sovereignty who came in off a very spotty work pattern, hadn't raced since Churchill Downs in the fall, runs them down for trainer Bill Mott. Doesn't seem like he was at anything close to fully cranked. So really looking forward to seeing how he moves forward, as he obviously has the goal of the Kentucky Derby and the Triple Crown. And then out west, I think we saw easily the best of the Kentucky Derby preps thus far. Barnes had the lead throughout, the highly regarded Bob Baffert trainee, but it was Journalism who got out of the gates well, got a good trip, but really strided out nicely in the end to prove, to me at least at this point, to prove one of the major contenders in the Derby. I know I'm not saying anything special there, but what were your thoughts on the 2 races?
Yeah, I thought these were 2 pretty solid prep races. The San Felipe out at Santa Anita, probably, like you mentioned, the better of the 2. Although I think I'm a little bit more keen on Sovereignty's performance in the Fountain of Youth than I was on Journalism against, Barnes, and the horses at Santa Anita. I am definitely biased to a very deep closer, and of course, Journalism comes by Barnes at the end of that race there, but Sovereignty came from a little bit further off the lead, though I will say, much further off the lead, though I will say, in watching replays to prep for the Tampa Bay Derby, and then as kind of our weekend recap segment here, and this is not like a novel opinion, but maybe something that I'm just now noticing, Umberto Rispoli really knows how to ride the hell out of a horse in that final turn at Santa Anita. He did it with Hill Road in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He did it with Journalism. That's just something that I picked up over the weekend, and I think I'm going to have to keep that in mind moving forward. I'm not the first one to introduce this concept, but I was very impressed with his rides on those horses for sure.
Well, I mean, I guess we want to talk about not Umberto Rispoli necessarily, but, thoughts on the 2 races. It's kind of fun to compare these two race horses, or all the race horses. I know a lot of people put out lists. We're going to kind of get into maybe a more in-depth overall look at the crop tomorrow, kind of a down week as we head into the big preps. But what did you feel about, I think you kind of said it, You think that sovereignty is a better, you prefer sovereignty right now over journalism if the Kentucky Derby was both of their next races?
I would say so, yeah. If we were, fast forwarding it ahead, it's already Derby time, whatever. We're taking the horses that we have now in March. I am personally more impressed with Sovereignty's run than I was with Journalism's, which might be an off the wall opinion. I don't know. I haven't really seen. But yeah, I think that it definitely shows maybe kind of the luck of the draw and the luck of the game. Like Godolphin was coming into Derby season this year with like 4 horses, and some of them have been sidelined with injuries. Some of them haven't really, risen to the occasion. And Sovereignty definitely has. And obviously, this is a farm that has a lot of confidence in their horses, in their animals, and continues to manage them in a way that will point them towards the Derby. Because as owner breeders, that's definitely an achievement that they're looking forward to. And yeah, I think Sovereignty, the trouble with the San Felipe out at Santa Anita, I think, and where Barnes maybe ran into a little bit of an issue, he's a big horse and he runs like a big horse, which can so often sometimes slow them down. So, of course, journalism gets that perfect trip and gets on by, but Sovereignty is a little more tactical, a little more gritty, maybe. So, just between these two, listen, it's my opinion and I can say what I want to say.
All right, I'm gonna have to steal the wheel here and take you on. More tactical. Sovereignty's got no speed. He needs everything to fall apart for him to go right. Whereas
Yeah, but there's 20 horses in a Derby. Who's not going to say that doesn't happen?
When's the last? I mean, that is a very infrequent trip to win from. Although we have seen it in 2 of the last 3, where you can come from way out of it, of course, with Mage and Rich Strike. But you really need a lot to go right, in my opinion. I just think journalism has everything you want in a Derby type horse at this point.
Oh,
I think
sure.
he's got the pedigree. I think he's got the strut. He looks the part from in terms of the pedigree, in terms of wanting more ground. And I would always much prefer to have a horse that I consider more tactical, being able to be up and on the lead if the pace is slow, but not need the lead. I think that gives him, exactly what I would want from a Derby horse. Let's talk real quick about Barnes. You talked about him there, but like, where do you put him in the mix with these? And like I said, we'll sort these out maybe a little bit more with, again, not a list perspective, but kind of a comprehensive look at the top contenders heading into the preps. But I think these 3 kind of stood out this weekend and are worth a discussion.
Yeah, they're definitely worth taking a look at. I mean, as far as the Baffert horses go, Barnes better obviously than likes of Getaway Car, Rodriguez, whatever. But I think Citizen Bowl is probably the best of that crop that we've seen this year. Barnes is not, I mean, I'm not going to say he's a toss or anything. They will continue to mature as we get closer to that first Saturday in May. But for me, I'm not as keen on him as some others on the trail right now.
Yeah, I happen to like him more still. I do have the concerns about the distance, which I think is obvious at this point now that he, sort of was passed, but they finished well. I think it was more journalism finishing well than Barnes stopping. And that was his first 2-turn test. So I have Barnes second still, if I'm ranking them. Citizen Bowl to me is, right there with them, no doubt about it. But he's won bigger races. Well, the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, of course, but he did it with a very advantageous trip, and it's very unlikely that he's going to have things that easy on the front end in any sort of, any sort of legitimate pace in the Derby, which we haven't seen an easy pace in a while. But yeah, this is a good introduction to get us prepared for next week, which this will kind of be the meat of the show. But we'll be back with another segment, the Tampa Bay Derby one, where I'll apply angle in just a moment. Well, not as full of a menu in terms of big races and in terms of Derby prep races this Saturday compared to last week, but there's one big one. It's the Grade 3 Tampa Bay Derby, and it didn't come up as big of a field as normal, but I think a lot of that is because it came up legitimate with top-end horses. You've got 2 Chad Brown runners that are both making their first start of the year, both adding blinkers for the first time. That is Chancer McPatrick, who was undefeated before heading out west for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Didn't have things his way that day, split the field, basically finishing 6th of 10. And then Hill Road, who wasn't in the Chad Brown barn for that race, but he finished full of run from off the pace when race that did not set up for him to finish 3rd at 61-1. Now he starts for Chad Brown. And then you've got Patch Adams, who has been a heavy favorite in each of his first 3 starts and was very disappointing in that 3rd start in the Southwest, but maybe there's reasons we could toss that race. I don't know, Bailey. It looks like a pretty fun addition to the Tampa Bay Derby.
I think so too. I think there are definitely some talented horses in this race. Of course, we've drawn 7 for the Tampa Bay Derby. I think personally, I don't have a super strong opinion. The one I will say I am most intrigued by, and I might have mentioned this to you before, is the number 3 Hill Road moving into the Chad Brown barn for his first start, like you mentioned. Now, this is one, like I said in our last segment when I was watching replays to prep for this week's show, just seeing how well Umberto Rispoli piloted him around that turn, 61-1 to come up. And, Larry Collmus is giving the call as they come through the stretch. And it almost seems like he finds a complete other gear that he did not have before. He got all the kickback in his face in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, basically the entire way, and then finds this like sneaky little pocket as they come into the turn and gets up to get by getaway car. Larry Collmus is
119 late pace rating. Serious stuff.
It's so strong, right? Like that's a legitimate racehorse. And of course, we all know I'm a big fan of closers, whatever. But Larry Collmus is like, oh, it's the 3 Baffords at the finish. And then here comes Hill Road, basically out of nowhere from last all the way to get up for 3rd. So this is a horse that has run in Europe before. That was his first U.S. start. And then now he's in the Chad Brown barn. So obviously he's not going to be 61-1 in the Tampa Bay Derby come Saturday, but I think he'll be a quality price on the tote board. And for me, I'm going to take another look at him. Now, moving down the field. Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I picked him for a second, and I think he makes plenty of sense, but I didn't know yet. You go on.
No, this is the other one that I wanted to ask you about, though, is Patch Adams. So like you mentioned, very short-priced favorite in his 3 career starts before those last fall races. I would say on paper, this is the horse that makes probably the most sense. He's got some of the best buyer figures in the race. But the Southwest, everyone knew, I was super keen on Speed King, and it was definitely Speed King's day. But, what happened with Patch Adams in the Southwest? Talk me through that.
Yeah, well, I think a key, this is applying angles, and to get to the angle, that I'm going to look to apply here, it's not necessarily an angle like route to sprint or turf to dirt. It's more kind of, a slang term that you hear people say. Well, I'm going to toss his last, and I like him. If you toss his last, he fits perfect in here. You hear, kind of slang around the track. If people, still use those slangs, I'm sure they do. Maybe not in your age bracket, Bailey, but Patch Adams, I'm going to toss his last race. I think, and I'm hopeful that he doesn't go off favorite in here, even though to you he looked best on paper. But that's a big part when you're tossing a race. And what it really means is to kind of make a legitimate excuse to forgive a race, being able to forgive a race and expect a better performance next time. Not the same as bouncing. Bouncing occurs when you maybe put forth a career best or a much the best effort and run real hard. Then, regardless of time off, a lot of times you're going to regress significantly in that next start. This is a little different. This is just kind of putting a line through one race in this one's career. I thought this horse, Bailey, was going to be the Derby favorite or one of them. I had him as one of those horses coming into the year. And the reason I'm going to toss the race is, first off, it was a really goofy race. Congrats to Speed King for taking advantage of that. There were a lot of horses off oddly, and they were the 3 favorites, to be frank. Sandman, who finished second, overcame it almost. He was off terribly. You had Gaming for Baffert on the rail. He was off poorly. And then you had Patch Adams, who's always been right up on the pace in sprints, stumble at the start. And, Flavian Pratt, I bet if Florent Giroux was on, he probably would have ridden him aggressively to get him into the race. In this case, that might have been a better decision because it didn't result in an in-the-money finish for the favorite. But what it did do is kind of leave Patch Adams for the better day, if you will. And because he just, it wasn't his race. At this point, I have to assume he wants to be up and on the pace. That's the one thing that we learned last time. If he was a super horse, he would have, that could handle adversity as well as, versatile, able to win with a lot of different trips. He would have run better. I think he needs to be up close to the pace. It was his first start at 2 turns. I thought he ran okay considering the trouble. I'm going to forgive it and hope his recency is good enough to beat this field of the Brown runners, as well as Owen Almighty, who's good, but I don't think wants to go this far.
Now, is there, when you're looking at a race like this and you decide, okay, I'm going to toss this race, is there anything out of a subpar performance that would make you not toss it? Just one race alone, like not necessarily a pattern, but just the one. You're going to say, okay, maybe he really did show us who he is.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely an alternative view to this about Patch Adams for sure, and I could just play devil's advocate and give you that, and where I would say, if I wasn't a big fan of Patch Adams coming into that race, he certainly didn't separate himself. He ran okay considering the trouble, but he didn't overcome adversity. So maybe he's just not that good. He what did he do? I mean, before the only thing he did was win a race at 3-5 or 1-2 by open lengths. It's more with Patch Adams, it's more what he's done in the mornings and what his reputation is in the mornings in his barn and all that stuff than it is what he's done on the track. So I think you could play devil's advocate. And I would say, Bailey, in most cases, you don't want to toss races. I think that would be more of the exception because, especially with these young horses, there's not a lot of time to regroup for these races. And I don't have to tell you, they're growing in leaps and bounds every week and month, right? At this point of their career and, maturing mentally and physically. So, you miss a beat here. I mean, if he doesn't run well today, he's off the trail. And I mean, he's been a disappointment. Maybe they'll either regroup or they'll cut him back in distance. And either way, it's not what they would hope for. They want to be in the Derby.
As always, thank you so much for watching another edition of Horse Sense. I'm Bailey Armour, was joined alongside today with my incredible co-host, Scott Shapiro, as we covered all of the horses coming into the Tampa Bay Derby and then a recap of those big Derby preps. Make sure that you're opted into our Triple Crown Trail $10 money back special. So many T's to say at once. As we get closer to that first Saturday in May, you'll get your cash back up to $10 if the horse you bet to win comes in second or third in select Derby preps. So make sure you check all that out along with our other promotions on Xpressbet and FirstBet. We've got some great promotions this week at Santa Anita and Gulfstream, and we'll see you next week on Horse Sense.